German Shepherd was crying from a pit. Under the house, what baby did. Next it left everyone in tears. The 5-year-old boy stood frozen in his Batman pajamas, his small hand pressed against the cold floorboards. What he heard next would change everything, not just for him, but for an entire community. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Tommy Miller woke to a sound that shouldn't exist. Not in their new house, not at 3 a.m, not coming from beneath his bedroom floor. The crying was soft, desperate, like someone trying to scream underwater. His dinosaur nightlight cast shadows on the wall as he slipped out of bed, bare feet touching the wooden floor that seemed to vibrate with each muffled sob. "Mommy?" His voice barely broke the silence of the hallway. The house felt different at night, bigger, stranger, full of corners where darkness pooled like spilled ink. Their farmhouse in rural Tennessee had been home for only 3 weeks, and Tommy still got lost looking for the bathroom sometimes. Sarah Miller appeared in her doorway, hair messy from sleep, her face creased with concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Bad dream." "Someone's crying under the house." Tommy's words came out matter of fact, the way only a child could deliver impossible news. "They need help." Mark Miller emerged behind his wife, rubbing his eyes. "Tommy, buddy, old houses make weird noises. Remember what we talked about? The pipes, the wind." "It's not the wind." Tommy's certainty stopped his father mid-sentence. "Listen." They stood there, 3 figures in a dark hallway, straining to hear. The house groaned gently, the way old wood does when it settles. A branch scraped against the window. Nothing else. "See?" Mark's hand found Tommy's shoulder, warm and reassuring. "Just the house talking to us. Let's get you back to—" The sound cut through his words like a knife through paper, low, mournful, unmistakably alive. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Mark's fingers tightened on Tommy's shoulder. "What was that?" Sarah whispered. "That's what I've been hearing." Tommy pulled away from his father, pressing his ear to the floor. "Every night since we moved in. But tonight it's louder. Tonight it sounds really scared." Mark grabbed a flashlight from the hall closet, his movements quick but trying to appear calm. "Probably a raccoon or something got stuck." "I'll check around outside." "Can I come?" Tommy asked. "No." Both parents answered in unison. But Tommy knew what he heard wasn't just an animal. He knew it the same way he'd known when Mrs. Henderson's cat was hurt last month, before anyone else noticed the limp. The same way he'd found that baby bird in their old backyard, hidden under leaves where no one else would have looked. Tommy knew things sometimes, felt them in his chest like a second heartbeat. After his parents tucked him back into bed, after they had checked around the house and found nothing, after they had assured him everything was fine, Tommy lay awake listening. The crying came in waves, sometimes stronger, sometimes so faint he wondered if he imagined it, but always there, always real, always pulling at something deep in his chest. He waited until the house fell silent again, until his parents' bedroom door clicked shut and their voices faded to nothing. Then he slipped out of bed again, this time grabbing his small flashlight, the one shaped like a rocket ship that Grandma had given him. He crept to the kitchen, moving like a shadow, avoiding the creaky board near the refrigerator. The crying was clearer downstairs, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Tommy opened the pantry slowly, carefully, and grabbed a bottle of water and some crackers. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, only that something needed help, and when things needed help, you helped them. That's what his mom always said. The back door was tricky. It had an alarm that would beep if opened, but Tommy had watched his dad disable it when taking out trash at night. His small fingers fumbled with the keypad, pressing the code he'd memorized, 4273. The light turned green. Outside, the world was different. The moon hung like a broken plate in the sky, casting everything in silver and shadow. The crying was louder here, definitely coming from beneath the house. Tommy followed the sound around to the side, where an old wooden lattice covered the crawl space. Some of the slats were broken, leaving gaps like missing teeth. He knelt in the damp grass, his pajamas immediately soaking through at the knees. "Hello?" His whisper seemed too loud in the quiet night. "Are you hurt?" The crying stopped. Tommy held his breath, waiting. Then, so soft he almost missed it, came a whimper. Not human, but not quite animal either. Something in between, something that spoke directly to that place in Tommy's chest where he kept his special knowing. "I brought water," he said, pushing the bottle through one of the gaps. "And food. I'll help you, I promise. Just please don't be scared." A sound came back, grateful, desperate, weak. Tommy's eyes filled with tears he didn't understand. He sat there in the wet grass, a 5-year-old boy in superhero pajamas, keeping vigil with something trapped in darkness. "I'll come back tomorrow," he whispered. "I'll figure out how to help you. You're not alone anymore." The next morning, Tommy could barely keep his eyes open at breakfast. Sarah noticed immediately. Mothers always did. She felt his forehead, checked his throat, asked if he felt sick. "Just tired?" Tommy mumbled into his cereal. "Bad dreams again?" Mark asked from behind his coffee mug. Tommy shook his head. He wanted to tell them, wanted to explain about the crying and the water bottle and the promise he'd made. But he remembered how they'd looked at him last night, worried, confused. The way adults looked when they thought something was wrong with you. "Maybe we should call Doctor Peterson," Sarah said to Mark, not quite quiet enough. "This is the 3rd time this week he's been up at night." "I'm fine," Tommy insisted, but his parents exchanged one of those looks that meant they'd talk about it later when he wasn't around. At preschool, Tommy could barely focus on finger painting or story time. His teacher, Miss Katie, asked if everything was okay at home. Tommy nodded, but his mind was under the house with whatever was crying in the dark. During nap time, while the other kids slept on their mats, Tommy lay awake planning. He needed rope maybe, or a ladder. He needed to see better under the house. He needed help, but from who? Adults wouldn't believe him. They never believed the important things. That afternoon, Sarah picked him up early for a special treat, ice cream at the shop downtown. But Tommy knew it wasn't really about ice cream. It was about the questions she asked between spoonfuls of chocolate chip cookie dough. "You know you can tell Mommy anything, right? Even if it seems scary or strange?" Tommy nodded, ice cream dripping down his chin. "And you know Daddy and I love you no matter what?" Another nod. "Is there anything you want to talk about? About the new house? About the sounds you're hearing?" Tommy wanted to tell her so badly it hurt. But he also remembered the time he'd told them about the colors around people's heads, the ones that showed if they were happy or sad or sick. They'd taken him to 3 different doctors after that. No more doctors, no more worried looks. "Just house sounds," he said finally. Like Daddy said. Sarah's smile was sad, but she didn't push. They finished their ice cream in silence, both thinking about different things. That evening, Tommy was ready. He'd hidden supplies under his bed. A longer flashlight stolen from the garage, a coil of jump rope from the toy box, more water and food, and his winter gloves for protection. He waited until the house was asleep, then made his escape again. This time, he was braver. This time, he pulled at the broken lattice until a larger piece came free. The opening was just big enough for him to squeeze through if he tried. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a dirt floor that sloped down toward the center of the house. The crying started again, stronger now, and Tommy could finally tell where it was coming from. Deeper under the house, where the foundation was older, where his dad had mentioned something about an old storm cellar from when the house was first built 100 years ago. "I'm coming," Tommy called softly. "Hold on." He squeezed through the opening, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might jump out of his chest. The space under the house was like another world, dark, damp, full of pipes and wooden beams that looked like the bones of some giant creature. Spiderwebs brushed his face, and things scurried away from his light. The crying grew louder as he crawled, forward, following the slope down. His flashlight caught something ahead, an opening in the ground, partially covered by old boards. Some of the boards had broken, leaving a hole just visible in the darkness. Tommy approached carefully, the way his dad had taught him to approach anything dangerous. He shined his light down into the hole and gasped. Eyes looked back at him, brown eyes, full of pain and fear and something else. Hope. A dog's eyes, in a face covered with dirt and dried blood. A German shepherd, from what Tommy could see, trapped at the bottom of what looked like an old well or cistern, at least 8 feet down. "Oh no," Tommy breathed. "How long have you been down there?" The dog whimpered, trying to move but clearly hurt. Tommy could see one of its legs was bent wrong, and there was something around its neck, a chain that disappeared into the rubble at the bottom of the pit. "I'm going to get help," Tommy said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew the problem. How could he explain this? How could he make adults understand without them getting angry about him crawling under the house? The dog cried again, weaker this time, and Tommy made a decision. He dropped the water bottle down, watching it land near the dog's head. The animal struggled toward it, lapping desperately at the water that spilled out. "I'll be back," Tommy promised. "I'll find a way." He crawled backward out of the space, his mind racing. He needed help, but it had to be the right kind of help. Someone who would believe him, who wouldn't just dismiss him as an imaginative child. The next morning, Tommy had a plan. He waited until his father was in the garage working on his car, then approached with his most serious expression. "Dad, I think there's something wrong under the house." Mark slid out from under the car, grease on his cheek. "The noises again? No, I mean, what if an animal really is stuck? What if it's hurt?" His father sat up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Tommy, we checked. There's nothing. But did you check the old cellar? The one you mentioned when we moved in?" Mark frowned. "How do you know about that?" "You talked about it. You said there was an old storm cellar that was sealed up years ago." "It is sealed. Has been since before we bought the place. But what if it's not? What if something fell in?" Mark studied his son's face, and Tommy tried to look as serious and adult as possible. Finally, his father sighed. "All right, let's take a look. But you stay behind me, understand?" Tommy nodded eagerly, hiding his relief. They went around to the side of the house where Tommy had been the night before, though he pretended not to know exactly where to look. "The lattice is broken here," Mark noted, pulling more pieces away. "I need to fix this before—" He stopped, tilting his head. "Do you hear that?" The crying was faint but unmistakable in the morning quiet. Mark's expression changed from skeptical to concerned in an instant. "Stay here," he ordered, grabbing a better flashlight from his toolbox. But Tommy followed anyway, and Mark was too focused to notice. They crawled under the house together, Mark leading the way with muttered complaints about spider webs and property inspectors who should have caught this. When they reached the hole, Mark's flashlight found the German shepherd immediately. "Jesus Christ," Mark breathed. "How did Tommy go get your mother? Tell her to call 911 and animal control and, I don't know, everyone." But Tommy was already sliding past his father, trying to get closer to the hole. "We can't wait, Dad. Look at him. He's really hurt." "Tommy, no. I'm the only one small enough to fit down there." The words hung in the dusty air between them. Mark's flashlight played over the narrow opening, the sheer walls of the pit, the injured dog at the bottom. His jaw tightened the way it did when he was making a hard decision. "Absolutely not. We're calling for help. They'll take too long. Look at him, Dad. He's dying." Mark looked again at the dog, saw what Tommy saw, the shallow breathing, the way it barely responded to their lights now. He pulled out his phone, but there was no signal under the house. "I'll go call for help. You stay here and—" "I'm going down." Tommy's voice was steady, sure in a way that stopped his father cold. "I know I can help him. I know it the same way I knew Mrs. Henderson's cat was sick, the same way I found that bird. You know I'm different, Dad. You and Mom both know it, even if you don't want to talk about it." Mark's face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, something that might have been recognition. "Tommy, please, Dad, trust me, just this once, trust me." The silent stretch between them, broken only by the dog's labored breathing. Finally, Mark closed his eyes, opened them again. "God help me," he muttered. Then, louder, "You wear my work gloves. You go slow. The second anything seems wrong, you come back up. Understand?" Tommy nodded, already pulling on the oversized gloves. Mark tested the edges of the hole, making sure they wouldn't crumble, then helped Tommy position himself. "I'm going to lower you down. Keep your feet against the wall. If you feel anything give way, you tell me immediately. Okay?" "Tommy." Mark's voice was thick with emotion. "Be careful. Please." The descent felt like forever. Tommy's feet scraped against dirt and old brick, sending small cascades of debris down. The dog looked up at them, too weak to do more than whimper. When Tommy's feet finally touched the bottom, he had to fight not to gag. The smell was overwhelming. Waste, fear, decay. "I'm okay," he called up, though his voice shook. The pit was wider at the bottom, carved out like a bell. Old bottles and rusted cans littered the ground, along with bones that Tommy didn't want to think about. The German Shepherd lay against one wall, the chain around its neck attached to what looked like an old pipe, embedded in the dirt. Up close, Tommy could see the dog was male, probably only a few years old, despite looking ancient with suffering. His fur was matted with blood and worse, ribs showing through like a skeleton trying to escape. "Hi," Tommy whispered, pulling off one glove to extend his hand slowly. "I'm Tommy. I'm here to help." The dog's tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, but an acknowledgement. When Tommy's hand touched his head, the dog closed his eyes and leaned into the touch like it was the first kindness he'd known in forever. "How's he look?" Mark called down. "Bad," Tommy answered honestly. "His leg is hurt and he's really skinny. There's a chain. Dad, someone put him down here. Someone did this on purpose." The silence from above was heavy with adult anger, the kind Tommy rarely heard from his father. "Can you get the chain off?" Tommy examined it. The chain was thick but old, rusted where it connected to the collar. The collar itself was too tight, embedded in the dog's neck from swelling. "I need something to cut it." Coming down, Mark lowered a pair of bolt cutters on the jump rope Tommy had brought. It took all of Tommy's small strength to position them and cut through the rusted chain. When it finally snapped, the dog struggled to stand, but couldn't, his injured leg giving out immediately. "He can't climb out," Tommy reported. "We need to lift him." "How much does he weigh?" Tommy tried to gauge. Maybe like when I carry my big backpack?" But heavier, more muttering from above. Then Mark's face appeared in the opening. "Okay, we're going to make a sling with my shirt. You wrap it under his chest and front legs." Mark lowered his work shirt down. Tommy carefully worked it under the dog, who whimpered but didn't resist. The trust in those brown eyes made Tommy's chest hurt. "You're going to be okay," Tommy promised. "My dad's really strong. He'll pull you up." But first, they had to get Tommy out. Mark pulled him up, Tommy's feet scrambling for purchase on the walls. When he emerged into the relatively bright space under the house, he had to blink away tears, from relief, from the smell, from everything. "You did good," Mark said roughly, pulling Tommy into a quick, fierce hug. "Now help me with this." Together, they pulled. The dog was heavier than expected, dead weight that didn't help itself. Twice they had to stop, readjust their grip. Tommy could hear his father's labored breathing, the strain in his voice as he counted, 3, 2, 1, pull. Finally, the German Shepherd's head appeared over the edge. One more massive effort and they had him out, lying on the dirt floor under the house. In the better light, his condition was even more shocking. Patches of fur were gone, showing infected wounds. His breathing was shallow, rattling. One eye was swollen shut. "We need to get him to a vet now," Mark said, already pulling off his undershirt to wrap the dog in. "Can you crawl out and get Mom?" "Tell her to start." The car? Tommy scrambled out faster than he'd ever moved in his life. Sarah was already outside, having heard the commotion. "Mom, we found him. There's a dog and he's really hurt and we need to go to the vet right now." Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times. "A dog? Under the house? Mom, please! He's dying." The urgency in Tommy's voice got through. Sarah ran for the car keys while Tommy grabbed blankets from the house. By the time Mark emerged, carrying the bundled German Shepherd like a baby, they were ready. The drive to the emergency vet clinic was tense. Tommy sat in the back, the dog's head on his lap, whispering constantly, "You're safe now? We've got you. Stay with us. Please stay with us." The dog's one good eye stayed fixed on Tommy's face, as if the boy's voice was the only thing keeping him tethered to life. Dr. Emma Rodriguez was waiting for them, having been called ahead by Sarah. Her expression went grim when she saw the dog's condition. "How long was he down there?" she asked, already directing her assistants to prepare an IV. "We don't know," Mark answered. "Could be days, could be weeks." "Weeks," Tommy said quietly. Everyone looked at him. "It's been weeks, since before we moved in." "How do you know that?" Dr. Rodriguez asked gently. Tommy shrugged, unable to explain the knowing, the certainty that sat in his chest like a stone. "I just do." The vet didn't question further, too focused on her patient. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, suffering from exposure and infected wounds. That leg is broken, probably has been for a while. And these marks, she traced patterns on the dog's skin. These are from prolonged restraint. This animal has been abused. Sarah's hand found Tommy's shoulder, squeezing tight. Mark's face was dark with anger. "Can you save him?" Tommy asked in a small voice. Dr. Rodriguez met his eyes. "I'm going to try, but he's very weak. The next 24 hours will be critical. He might not." "He will," Tommy interrupted. "He's strong. He waited for us to find him. He won't give up now." The vet smiled sadly. "I hope you're right. We'll need to keep him here, run fluids, antibiotics, possibly surgery on that leg once he's stable enough." "Whatever it takes," Mark said immediately. "Whatever he needs." As they prepared to leave the dog in the vet's care, Tommy refused to go until he could say goodbye. They led him into the treatment room, where the German Shepherd lay on a padded table, already hooked to an IV, looking small and fragile under the bright lights. "I have to go," Tommy whispered, stroking the dog's head carefully. "But I'll come back. Every day I'll come back. You just have to fight, okay? You have to want to live." The dog's tail moved slightly, and he licked Tommy's hand once with a dry tongue. "What should we call him?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "For the paperwork." Tommy didn't hesitate. "Maximum, his name is Max." "How do you know?" Sarah asked. Tommy looked at the dog, at the way his ear ticked at the name. "Sometimes you just know things." That night, Tommy couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't from mysterious crying. It was from worry. He kept seeing Max's eyes, feeling the trust the dog had placed in him. At midnight, he crept to his parents' room. "Mom? Dad?" They were both awake, lying in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" Sarah asked, making room for Tommy between them. "Do you think Max will be okay?" "Dr. Rodriguez is very good," Mark said carefully. "She'll do everything she can." "That's not what I asked." His parents were quiet for a moment. Then Sarah said, "You saved him, Tommy. You gave him a chance. That's all any of us can do sometimes. Give someone a chance." "But what if it's not enough?" Mark pulled Tommy closer. Then at least he knew kindness at the end. At least he wasn't alone. Tommy thought about that, about kindness and loneliness and the space between life and death where Max was hovering. He closed his eyes and did something he'd never tried before. He reached out with that special knowing, that feeling in his chest, and tried to send it to Max. "You're not alone. I'm here. We're all here. Please don't go." Miles away in the veterinary clinic, Max's heart monitor showed a subtle change. His heart rate, which had been dangerously low, strengthened slightly. Dr. Rodriguez, checking on him during her night rounds, noticed and made a note in his chart. Patient showing unexpected improvement. Continue aggressive treatment. The next morning came too early, and not soon enough. Tommy was dressed and ready before his parents were even awake, standing by the door with his shoes on. "The clinic doesn't open until 8, Sarah said gently, finding him there. "I know, but we can be first." They were. Dr. Rodriguez met them with cautious optimism. "He made it through the night. That's a very good sign. His vitals are stronger, and he's responding to the antibiotics. Would you like to see him?" Tommy was through the door before she finished the question. Max was still lying down, still connected to various machines, but his good eye was open and alert. When he saw Tommy, his tail thumped against the table with more energy than before. "Hi, Max," Tommy said, tears streaming down his face. "You did it. You stayed." "He's not out of the woods yet, Doctor," Rodriguez warned. "We need to operate on that leg, and there's still risk of infection, organ failure from the prolonged starvation." "But he's fighting," Tommy said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," the vet agreed, something wondering in her voice. "He's fighting harder than I expected." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Tommy went to school, barely focusing on anything, then straight to the clinic. He would sit with Max for hours, reading him picture books, telling him about his day, or just sitting quietly with his hand on Max's side, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. The staff began to notice something unusual. Max's recovery accelerated whenever Tommy was there. His heart rate stabilized, his breathing deepened, He even attempted to eat when Tommy hand-fed him. "It's remarkable, Doctor," Rodriguez told Sarah and Mark. "I've seen bonds between children and animals before, but it's like Tommy's presence is actually healing him." On the fourth day, Max stood up for the first time. It was only for a few seconds, his legs shaking like leaves, but he did it while looking directly at Tommy as if to say, "See? I'm trying. Good boy," Tommy cheered. "Good boy, Max." The dog's tail wagged so hard he almost fell over, and everyone in the room found themselves laughing through tears. But the mystery of how Max ended up in that pit remained. Mark had contacted the previous owners of the house, but they claimed to know nothing about a dog. The county had no records of a German Shepherd being reported missing in the area. It was Tommy who provided the first clue, though he didn't realize it at the time. "Max says he used to live in a white house," Tommy mentioned casually one day while brushing Max's slowly improving coat. "Max says?" Dr. Rodriguez asked carefully. Tommy flushed. I just think he did. He seems like he would have lived in a white house." But later, when Mark drove around the rural area near their home, he found it. A white house about 2 miles away, abandoned, with a foreclosure notice on the door. The grass was overgrown, windows boarded, but in the backyard was a dog house, a large one, German Shepherd-sized, and scratched into the wood beside the entrance. M-A-X. Mark took pictures and brought them to the sheriff's office. The investigation that followed would uncover a disturbing story, but that was still days away. For now, there was just a boy and a dog healing each other in ways that medicine couldn't quite explain. On the 7th day, Max took his first real steps, not shuffling, not shaking, but actual steps across the clinic floor to where Tommy sat. When he reached the boy, he collapsed, exhausted but triumphant, his head in Tommy's lap. "You're the bravest dog in the world," Tommy whispered. "The very bravest." Max's tail wagged agreement, and in that moment, everyone watching knew that this dog would live. Not just survive, but truly live. Because he had something worth living for. A 5-year-old boy who had heard his cries when no one else could, who had believed when no one else would, who had crawled into darkness to bring him back to light. But the real story, the full truth of what had happened to Max and why, was just beginning to unfold. And what they would discover would shake their small Tennessee community to its core, revealing secrets that some had tried to bury, as deep as they had buried Max. The White House Mark had found belonged to the Crandall family, or it had, before the bank took it 3 months ago. Sheriff Davies pulled the records, his expression growing darker with each page he read. "Robert Crandall," he told Mark over the phone. "Lost his job at the factory last year. Wife left him, took the kids. By all accounts, he didn't handle it well. And Max? Neighbors say the dog was devoted to the family, especially the kids. When they left, Crandall kept him, but after the foreclosure," the sheriff paused. "We found Crandall's truck at the bottom of Beaver Lake. Been there about 6 weeks. Suicide? Looks like it. But if your timeline is right, he must have done what he did to the dog first." Mark's grip on the phone tightened. He threw his dog in a pit and then killed himself? Some people, when they decide to go, they don't want to leave anything behind. It's sick, but it happens. "That's not sick, Sheriff. That's evil. Won't argue with you there." Mark didn't tell Tommy the full story, just that Max's previous owner was gone and couldn't hurt him anymore. But Tommy seemed to know anyway. That night, sitting with Max at the clinic, he said quietly, "The sad man isn't coming back, is he?" "No," Mark confirmed. "He's not." "Good." Max was scared of him at the end. The man changed, became different. Dark. Mark didn't ask how Tommy knew this. He was learning to accept his son's unusual insights, even if he didn't understand them. By the 2nd week, Max was strong enough to leave the clinic for short periods. The first time Tommy brought him home was supposed to be just for an afternoon, a test run. But when it came time to return to the clinic, Max planted himself at Tommy's feet and refused to move. "I think he's made his choice, Doctor," Rodriguez said with a smile. "Medically, he still needs daily treatment, but that can be done on an outpatient basis. If you're willing to take on the responsibility—" "Yes!" Tommy shouted before his parents could even discuss it. "Yes, yes, yes." Sarah and Mark exchanged glances. They had already known this was coming, had already discussed it late at night when Tommy couldn't hear. How could they possibly say no after everything? There are conditions, Sarah said firmly. You help with his medicine every day. You help with his physical therapy. This is a big responsibility, Tommy. I know, I promise, I'll do everything. And, Mark added, we need to make the house safe for him. That means fixing that crawl space properly, making sure there are no other dangers. Tommy nodded eagerly. Max won't ever be in danger again. Ever. The first night Max spent in the Miller house was emotional for everyone. They'd set up a bed for him in the living room, close to Tommy's bedroom, but by morning they found both boy and dog curled up together on Tommy's small bed. Max's body curved protectively around the child. Should we... Sarah started. Leave them, Mark said softly. They need each other. As Max grew stronger, his personality began to emerge. He was gentle, intelligent, and completely devoted to Tommy. But there were shadows too. Loud noises made him cower. He wouldn't go near the side of the house where the crawl space was, and sometimes he would stare at nothing, trembling until Tommy's touch brought him back. Trauma, Dr. Rodriguez explained during a follow-up visit. It may never fully go away, but with patience and love. He'll get both, Tommy said firmly, forever and ever. The story of Max's rescue had spread through their small town. People would stop Sarah at the grocery store to ask about the miracle dog. The local newspaper wanted to do a feature. The elementary school invited Tommy to speak to the other children about animal safety and awareness. Tommy refused most of the attention. Max doesn't like lots of people, he explained, which was true. The dog was nervous around strangers, only really comfortable with the Miller family and Dr. Rodriguez. But there was one invitation Tommy couldn't refuse. Mrs. Chen from the animal shelter called one evening. We have a situation. A dog was brought in, found chained in a yard after the owners moved away. She won't eat, won't respond to anyone. We're worried we might lose her. I know it's a lot to ask, but would Tommy consider visiting? Maybe. I'll ask him, Sarah said, though she suspected she already knew the answer. When told about the dog, Tommy's response was immediate. We have to go. Now. It's 8 o'clock at night, sweetheart. Mom, she's scared and alone. We have to go now. Something in his voice, that same certainty that had led them to Max, made Sarah grab her keys. The shelter was officially closed, but Mrs. Chen met them at the door. Thank you for coming. She's back here. The dog was a pit bull mix, scarred from fighting, one ear torn. She lay in the corner of her kennel, eyes open but unseeing, ribs visible through her dull coat. Oh, Tommy breathed. Oh, she's so sad. He sat down right outside the kennel, not trying to touch her, just sitting. Max, who they'd brought along, lay down beside him. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then Tommy started talking, so quietly the adults could barely hear. I know you're tired. I know everything hurts, but it gets better. I promise it gets better. Max was hurt too, weren't you, boy? But look at him now. He's happy. He's loved. You can be loved too. The pit bull's ear twitched. Her eyes slowly focused on Tommy. That's it, Tommy encouraged. Come back. Don't go away. Come back to us. Slowly, painfully, the dog lifted her head. Then, as if pulled by an invisible string, she crawled toward Tommy. Not all the way, but closer. Close enough that when Tommy slowly extended his fingers through the kennel bars, she could sniff them. Her tail, which Mrs. Chen said hadn't moved once since she'd arrived 3 days ago, gave the tiniest wag. There you are, Tommy whispered. There you are. Mrs. Chen was crying. Sarah was crying. Even Mark, who'd insisted on coming when he heard where they were going, had to turn away to wipe his eyes. How? Mrs. Chen asked. How does he do it? Sarah shook her head. We don't know. He just knows things, feels things. Tommy spent an hour with the pit bull, whom he decided should be called Luna. By the end, she was eating from his hand, her tail wagging steadily if weakly. She'll be okay now, Tommy announced. But she needs a special home, someone who understands about being hurt. Mrs. Chen nodded. I'll make sure of it. As they drove home, Max's head on his lap, Tommy was quiet. Then he said, There are so many, aren't there? So many who need help. Yes, Sarah said gently. Too many. But we helped too. That's something, right? That's everything, Mark said firmly. You can't save them all, buddy. But the ones you save, to them, You're the whole world." Tommy nodded, his hand stroking Max's fur. "Max saved me too," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Before we moved here, I felt different. Weird, like I didn't fit anywhere. But Max showed me why I'm different. It's not bad. It's so I can help." Mark reached back to squeeze Tommy's knee. "You're exactly who you're supposed to be, son." Exactly. That night, as Tommy and Max slept curled together, Sarah and Mark stood in the doorway watching them. "Our son can talk to animals," Sarah said, as if testing how the words sounded out loud. "Seems like it," Mark agreed. "That should be impossible." "Lots of things should be impossible. Doesn't mean they are." Sarah leaned into her husband. "What do we do with this? This gift or ability or whatever it is? We let him use it, guide him, protect him from people who might want to exploit it. But mostly we just love him and let him be who he is. A 5-year-old dog whisperer. Or 5-year-old dog whisperer." They stood there a moment longer, watching boy and dog breathe in perfect synchronization. Two souls who had found each other across impossible odds. The next morning brought unexpected news. Sheriff Davies called to inform them that Robert Crandall's sister had come forward after hearing about Max's rescue. "She wants to meet the family that saved him," the sheriff explained. "Says she has some things that might belong to the dog. Photos, toys from when he was a puppy. She's pretty broken up about the whole situation." Tommy overheard and immediately said, "Max doesn't want his old toys. They make him sad." Mark relayed this to the sheriff, who paused. "How does... Never mind. I'll tell her maybe later when the dog's more settled." But the sister, Patricia Crandall Hayes, was persistent. She showed up at their door that afternoon, a small woman with red-rimmed eyes and a box in her arms. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said. I needed to see him, to know he was okay. Robert and I hadn't spoken in years, but Max was such a good dog." Tommy appeared in the doorway. Max pressed against his leg. The moment Max saw Patricia, he whined and tried to back away. "He remembers you," Tommy said, not unkindly. "But you remind him of the sad times." Patricia's face crumpled. "I should have checked on Robert. Should have known he was struggling. Maybe I could have prevented—" "You couldn't," Tommy said with that eerie certainty. "He decided a long time ago. Before the house, before the money problems. The darkness was already in him." Patricia stared at the 5-year-old boy who spoke like an old soul. "How do you—" "Max knows." Max saw it all. Slowly, Patricia knelt down, not reaching for the dog, just making herself smaller. "I'm so sorry, Max. I'm so sorry for what he did to you." Max whined again, but this time took a tiny step forward. Just one, but enough. "He forgives you," Tommy translated, "but he needs you to go now. It hurts too much." Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. She set the box on the porch. "These are happy things." From before. Maybe someday. After she left, Tommy went through the box. There were photos of Max as a puppy with 2 laughing children. Toys that still smelled faintly of happier times. A collar with a tag that read, "Max Crandall, beloved friend." "Do you want any of it?" Tommy asked Max. The dog sniffed the items, then gently took one thing in his mouth, a small stuffed duck. He carried it to his bed and curled around it, the first toy he'd shown interest in since his rescue. "That was his favorite when the children lived there," Tommy explained to his parents. "It reminds him of love." The weeks turned into months. Max grew stronger, his coat glossy, his eyes bright. The physical therapy helped his injured leg, though he would always have a slight limp. Tommy was true to his word, helping with every treatment, every exercise, never complaining even when it meant missing cartoons or playtime. But more than that, Tommy and Max became inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. Tommy's teachers agreed to let Max come to school as a therapy dog, after seeing how he calmed not just Tommy, but other anxious children. Max would lie quietly during lessons, his presence a comfort to anyone who needed it. "He's helping others now," Tommy explained proudly. Like someone helped him. The story might have ended there, a boy and his dog, healing together, helping others. But life had more chapters to write. One evening, 6 months after Max's rescue, Tommy woke again to crying. But this time, it wasn't coming from under the house. It was coming from Max, who stood at Tommy's window, whimpering at something outside. "What is it, boy?" Tommy whispered, joining him at the window. In the moonlight, he could see a shape at the edge of their property, small, moving strangely, clearly in distress. "Mom! Dad!" Tommy called. "Something's wrong." This time, his parents didn't question him. They'd learned to trust Tommy's instincts, especially when backed by Max's. Mark grabbed a flashlight and they all went outside. Max led the way, his nose to the ground, pulling them toward the tree line. There, caught in an old barbed wire fence, was a young deer. Its leg was tangled, cut deeply, and it had clearly been struggling for hours. "Don't get too close," Mark warned. "It's wild. It could hurt you even if it doesn't mean to." But Tommy was already approaching slowly, Max beside him. The deer's eyes were wild with fear, its breathing rapid. "Hey," Tommy said softly. "Hey, it's okay. We're going to help you." The deer thrashed once more, then went still, exhausted. Tommy kept talking, that same soothing tone he'd used with Max, with Luna at the shelter. Gradually, the deer's breathing slowed. "Dad, can you cut the wire?" Mark moved carefully, wire cutters in hand. "If it runs, let it go. Don't try to stop it." But the deer didn't run. It stood trembling as Mark cut the wire away, blood running down its leg. When it was free, instead of bolting, it took a single step and collapsed. "It's too weak," Tommy said. "Too hurt. We need Dr. Rodriguez." "Tommy, it's a wild animal. We can't—" "Please, Dad." Mark looked at his son, at Max, who was gently sniffing the deer without aggression, at the injured animal that should have fled but didn't. "I'll call her," he sighed. Dr. Rodriguez arrived within the hour, because of course she did. She'd learned, like everyone else, that when Tommy said an animal needed help, you listened. "This is highly unusual," she said, examining the deer's injuries. "I'm not really equipped for wildlife." "But you'll try?" Tommy asked. She looked at the boy who'd become something of a legend in their small town, the child who could reach animals no one else could reach. "I'll try." They converted the garage into a temporary recovery space. The deer, which Tommy named Grace, needed antibiotics, wound care, and rest. By all logic, it should have been terrified, should have fought every treatment. Instead, it seemed to understand that these humans meant no harm. "It's because of Max," Tommy explained. "Animals know when another animal trusts someone. Max trusts us, so Grace knows she can too." Whether that was true or Tommy's imagination, the deer recovered under their care. Within a week, it was standing. Within 2, it was walking around the garage. And always, Max was there, lying nearby, a calming presence. The day they released Grace back to the wild was bittersweet. She walked to the tree line, then turned back to look at them, at Tommy especially. "Go on," Tommy said. "You're free. But you can visit if you want." The deer disappeared into the woods, but sometimes, in the early morning or at dusk, they would see her at the edge of their property, watching the house, watching over the boy who had saved her, just as he had saved Max. "You have a gift," Sarah told Tommy one night as she tucked him into bed, Max already in his usual spot. "A wonderful, special gift." "I know," Tommy said simply. "Max taught me that it's okay to be different. That different can help people. Or animals." "What do you want to be when you grow up?" she asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Someone who helps," Tommy said. "Like Dr. Rodriguez. Or maybe something new, something for kids and animals who are hurt and scared." Sarah kissed his forehead. "I think you're already that person." As she left the room, she heard Tommy whisper to Max, "We did good, didn't we, boy? We did real good." Max's tail thumped agreement, and in the darkness, boy and dog settled into sleep, guardians of each other's hearts, proof that love could reach across any divide, heal any wound, and find hope in the deepest, darkest places. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because somewhere in town, the phone at the sheriff's office was ringing with a report of strange sounds coming from an abandoned building. Sounds like an animal in distress. And tomorrow, Sheriff Davies would remember the boy who heard things others couldn't hear, who knew things others couldn't know. Tomorrow, Tommy and Max would begin a new rescue, one that would test their bond and reveal that Tommy's gift was even stronger than anyone had imagined. For now, though, they slept. A boy who had found his purpose and a dog who had found his salvation, breathing in perfect rhythm, two hearts beating as one in the quiet Tennessee night. The phone rang at 6 a.m., jarring the Miller household awake. Mark fumbled for it, voice thick with sleep. "Hello? Mr. Miller, this is Sheriff Davies. I'm sorry to call so early, but we have a situation. We need Tommy." Those 3 words, "we need Tommy," had become both a source of pride and worry for the Miller family. Mark sat up, instantly alert. "What kind of situation?" "We got a call about strange sounds from the old Brackenridge factory. Officers investigated and found, well, it's hard to explain. There's something in there, Mr. Miller. Multiple somethings. And they're in bad shape. We've tried everything, but they won't let anyone near them. Animal control is at a loss." Someone suggested calling Tommy. Mark glanced at his son's room, where Tommy was undoubtedly still asleep, Max curled beside him. "Sheriff, he's 5 years old. I know, believe me, I know how this sounds. But after what he did with that dog, and what I've heard about other animals he's helped, Mr. Miller, we have what looks like a puppy in there that's barely breathing, if anyone can reach it. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Sarah was already up, having heard enough of the conversation. Another rescue? Sounds worse than that. Multiple animals. The sheriff sounded shaken. They woke Tommy gently, explaining the situation. The boy listened solemnly, then looked at Max. For a long moment, boy and dog stared at each other in that way that made the adults feel like intruders on a private conversation. "Max says it's bad," Tommy finally said. "Really bad. But we have to go." The Brackenridge factory had been closed for 2 years, another casualty of the economic downturn that had hit their small town hard. It sat like a rotting tooth on the edge of the industrial district, windows boarded, walls covered in graffiti. Police cars surrounded it now, their lights painting the morning mist in reds and blues. Sheriff Davies met them at the entrance, his face grim. "Thank you for coming. I should warn you, what's in there? It's not pleasant." "What did you find?" Mark asked, keeping his voice low. "Dog fighting ring, from the looks of it. Abandoned in a hurry, maybe a week ago. They left the animals behind." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "They just left them? Locked in cages. No food, no water. Most didn't make it. But there are survivors. They're in the back section. Traumatized, aggressive. We can't get near them without risking injury to them or us." Tommy had been listening quietly, his hand on Max's head. Now he spoke up. "There's a puppy. A little one." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "How did you—" "Yes, there's a puppy. Pit bull, we think. Can't be more than 8 weeks old. It's in the worst shape." "She," Tommy corrected. "She's a girl. And she's waiting for someone." Before anyone could question this, Tommy was walking toward the factory entrance, Max limping beside him. The adults hurried to follow. The smell hit them first. Waste, fear, death. Sarah gagged, pulling her shirt over her nose. Even the hardened police officers looked queasy. But Tommy kept walking, his small figure dwarfed by the massive machinery and shadows of the abandoned factory. They followed a path marked by police tape deeper into the building. The sounds started then. Whimpering, growling, the rattle of cages being shaken. In a large room that might have once been used for storage, they found them. 15 cages, various sizes. 5 still contained living dogs. The others? Sheriff Davies had already arranged for the bodies to be removed once the living were safe. The surviving dogs were in terrible condition. Thin, wounded, some barely conscious. "Dear God," Sarah whispered. Tommy approached the cages slowly, Max staying close but not aggressive. The dogs inside reacted immediately, some cowering, others snarling, all except one. In the smallest cage, a tiny pit bull puppy lay still, her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. "That's her," Tommy said. "That's Hope." "Hope?" Sheriff Davies asked. "That's her name. She told me." No one questioned it anymore. They'd learned that when Tommy named an animal, he was usually right. Tommy sat down in front of Hope's cage, ignoring the filth on the floor. "Hi, Hope. I'm Tommy. This is Max. We're here to help." The puppy didn't respond, didn't even open her eyes. But Tommy wasn't deterred. He began talking, his voice soft and steady. telling Hope about Max's rescue, about their house, about all the good things waiting for her if she would just hold on. Max lay down beside Tommy, adding his own soft whines to the conversation. The other dogs had gone quiet, all watching this strange scene, a small boy and a German shepherd speaking to a dying puppy. "Can you open the cage?" Tommy asked Sheriff Davies. "Son, she might be—" "She's not. She's just very tired. Please." The sheriff used bolt cutters on the lock. The cage door swung open with a rusty shriek. Tommy reached in carefully, his small hands impossibly gentle as they touched the puppy. Hope's eyes fluttered open. They were blue, unusual for a pit bull, clouded with pain but still aware. She looked at Tommy, and something passed between them, that same connection that had sparked between Tommy and Max months ago. "There you are," Tommy whispered. "I knew you were in there." He lifted Hope carefully, cradling her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, just fur and bones and the faintest heartbeat. But she was alive. "We need Doctor Rodriguez," Tommy said, "right now." Mark was already on the phone. The vet, who had been warned she might be needed, was already on her way. "What about the others?" Sarah asked, looking at the remaining dogs. Tommy studied each cage, Max beside him. "They're scared, hurt, but—" He paused at one cage containing a scarred adult pit bull, male, with one eye missing. "This one's different." "Different how?" Sheriff Davies asked. "He wasn't a fighter. He was a bait dog. They used him to train the others." Tommy's voice was matter of fact, but tears were streaming down his face. "His name is Soldier." He protected Hope when he could. The one-eyed dog was pressed against the back of his cage, trembling. Unlike the others who showed aggression, he showed only fear. "Can we open his cage too?" Tommy asked. "Tommy, no," Mark said firmly. "He's been through trauma. He could be dangerous. He won't hurt me. He doesn't have any hurt left in him, just scared." Sheriff Davies looked at the other officers, then at Mark and Sarah. "Your call, folks." Sarah knelt beside her son. "Tommy, honey, you're holding Hope. You can't help them all at once." "Max can help," Tommy said. "Can't you, boy?" Max stood, favoring his injured leg, but steady. He approached Soldier's cage slowly, no aggression in his posture, just calm presence. The two dogs looked at each other through the bars. "Max is telling him we're safe," Tommy explained, "that humans can be good, that there's life after the bad place." Whether it was true or Tommy's imagination, Soldier's trembling lessened. When Sheriff Davies carefully opened the cage, the dog didn't bolt or attack. He crawled out on his belly, moving toward Max, who stood perfectly still, allowing the traumatized dog to sniff him. "Good boy, Soldier," Tommy said softly. "You're so brave." Dr. Rodriguez arrived then, taking in the scene with professional calm that didn't quite hide her horror. "Let's get them out of here," she said. "All of them." The rescue operation took 3 hours. Each dog had to be carefully removed, some requiring sedation, all needing immediate medical attention. Tommy refused to let go of Hope, carrying her to Doctor Rodriguez's van himself. Soldier wouldn't leave Max's side, the two dogs walking together like old friends. At Oasis, the clinic, controlled chaos erupted. Dr. Rodriguez and her staff worked on multiple animals at once, setting up IVS, treating wounds, assessing damage. Hope was the most critical, immediately placed in an oxygen chamber with multiple IV lines. "I don't want to give you false hope, Doctor," Rodriguez told Tommy gently. "She's septic. Her organs are starting to shut down, even with aggressive treatment. She'll make it," Tommy said with that unshakable certainty. "She has something to live for." "What do you mean?" Tommy looked through the glass at the tiny puppy fighting for her life. "There's a girl, Sophie. She needs Hope, and Hope needs her." Sarah and Mark exchanged glances. They'd heard Tommy make pronouncements like this before, and they'd learned not to dismiss them. "Who's Sophie?" Sarah asked. "I don't know yet, but she's coming." While the dogs were being treated, Sheriff Davies was investigating how a dog fighting ring had operated so close to town without detection. The factory's ownership was a maze of shell companies, but one name kept appearing in the paperwork: Victor Reyes. "We've been looking for him for months," the sheriff told Mark. "Suspected of running fighting rings across 3 states. if we can prove he was involved here. Will that help the dogs? Tommy asked from where he sat beside Hope's chamber. It might help us find more dogs who need rescue, the sheriff admitted, and it would put a very bad man in prison. Tommy nodded, then looked at Max and Soldier, who were lying side by side in the corner. Soldier knows things. He saw faces, heard names. Sheriff Davies started to ask how a dog could provide evidence, then stopped. In the months since Tommy had found Max, stranger things had proven true. That night, the Miller family kept vigil at the clinic. Hope's condition worsened before it improved, her tiny body fighting against massive infection. Tommy never left her side, talking constantly, his hand pressed against the glass. "Tell me about Sophie," Sarah said around midnight, trying to keep Tommy engaged and awake. "She's 8. Her dad made her watch the fights sometimes. She hated it. She would sneak water to the dogs when he wasn't looking." Tommy's eyes never left Hope. She tried to save Hope once, but her dad caught her. That's when they left. But Sophie never forgot. She's been having nightmares about Hope. "How could you possibly know that?" Mark asked, though he'd learned to expect the impossible from his son. "Hope dreams about her. Animals dream, you know. And in her dreams there's always this girl with dark hair and a pink coat." Sarah felt a chill. It was too specific, too detailed to be imagination. "Where is Sophie now?" "Coming," Tommy said simply. "She'll be here tomorrow." The next morning brought 2 surprises. First, Hope's condition had stabilized. She was still critical, but her vital signs were stronger. Dr. Rodriguez called it miraculous. The second surprise arrived at 10 a.m. in the form of a social worker and a small girl with dark hair, wearing a faded pink coat despite the warm weather. "This is Sophie Reyes," the social worker explained to a stunned Sheriff Davies. "Her mother brought her in this morning. She says she has information about her father's activities." Sophie was thin, hollow-eyed, clinging to the social worker's hand, but when she heard barking from the clinic area, her head snapped up. "Are there dogs here?" she asked in a small voice. "Did you find them?" "Did you find the dogs from the factory?" Sheriff Davies knelt down. "We found some dogs, yes." "How did you know about— Is Hope alive?" Sophie interrupted, tears already falling. "The puppy? Please, is she alive?" Tommy appeared in the doorway, having somehow known to come. "She's alive! She's been waiting for you." Sophie stared at the boy she'd never met, who somehow knew exactly what she needed to hear. "Can I see her?" Dr. Rodriguez initially protested. Hope was too fragile. Sophie was a stranger. There were protocols. But Tommy's quiet insistence won out. It always did when it came to the animals. They led Sophie to Hope's chamber. The moment the girl appeared in the puppy's line of sight, Hope's tail moved. Just barely, just once. But it moved. "Hope!" Sophie pressed her hands against the glass. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you before." "You saved her by loving her," Tommy said. "She held on because she knew you'd come back." Sophie looked at this strange, knowing boy. "Who are you?" "I'm Tommy. I can hear them sometimes. The animals. Hope told me about you." Instead of disbelief, Sophie's face showed relief. "She told you? Is she angry with me?" "No. She loves you. She's always loved you." Sophie broke down then, weeks of fear and guilt pouring out in sobs that shook her small frame. Sarah instinctively pulled the girl into a hug, this child who'd seen too much, who'd tried to show kindness in a cruel world. "My dad is a bad man," Sophie whispered into Sarah's shoulder. "I tried to tell my mom, but she was scared. When we finally ran away, I wanted to take the dogs, but we couldn't. I've been having nightmares." "It's over now," Sarah soothed. "You're safe. The dogs are safe." "Where's my dad?" Sheriff Davies answered carefully. "We're looking for him." "Do you know where he might go?" Sophie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "He has a place. Another factory in Millerville. That's where the big fights happen." The sheriff immediately stepped aside to make calls. This was the break they'd been looking for. Over the next hours, Sophie told her story. Her father had started with one dog, claiming it was for protection. Then came the training, the violence, the other men who brought their dogs. Sophie had tried to protect the animals when she could, sneaking them food and water, even releasing some when her father was drunk. "He caught me once," she said, unconsciously rubbing her arm where bruises had long faded. After that, I could only watch. But I promised Hope I'd come back for her. I promised. "You kept your promise," Tommy said. "That's what matters." Dr. Rodriguez allowed Sophie to sit beside Hope's chamber, the girl's presence seeming to strengthen the puppy's will to fight. Within hours, Hope was breathing easier, her heart rate stabilizing. "It's like she was waiting, Doctor," Rodriguez murmured to Sarah, "waiting for permission to live." That evening, Sheriff Davies returned with news. "We raided the Millerville location. Found 12 more dogs and Victor Reyes. He's in custody." Sophie went rigid. "He's in jail?" "He won't hurt anyone again," the sheriff assured her. "Not you, not any animal." The girl seemed to shrink and expand at the same time, fear leaving space for something like hope. "What happens to me now?" The social worker, who'd been observing quietly, spoke up. "Your mother has been granted temporary custody. She's been getting help, finding work. She wants to make a fresh start with you. Can I keep Hope when she's better?" Everyone looked at Dr. Rodriguez, who looked at Tommy. The boy nodded firmly. "I think," the vet said carefully, "that would be the best medicine for both of you." The recovery of all the rescued dogs became a community effort. The local news picked up the story, donations poured in, and volunteers lined up to help. But at the center of it all were Tommy and Sophie, two children who understood something about the animals that the adults could only observe with wonder. Tommy worked with Soldier, the one-eyed bait dog who flinched at shadows but slowly learned to trust again. Sophie spent every allowed moment with Hope, the puppy gaining strength daily under the girl's devoted care. And Max, the dog who'd started it all, became a bridge between the traumatized animals and the possibility of healing. "He tells them his story," Tommy explained to a reporter who'd come to cover the rescue. "He shows them that the bad times end, that people can be good." "You mean metaphorically?" the reporter asked. "No," Tommy said simply. "I mean, he tells them." The reporter's article would go viral, the story of the boy who could speak to animals and the girl who'd risked everything to show kindness in a dark place. Donations increased, allowing Dr. Rodriguez to treat every rescued dog without concern for cost. But fame wasn't what mattered to Tommy or Sophie. What mattered were the small victories. Soldier taking a treat from a human hand for the first time. Hope attempting to play with a toy. The moment when one of the rescued dogs finally wagged its tail. 3 weeks after the rescue, Hope was strong enough to leave the clinic. The day Sophie's mother came to take them both home was emotional for everyone. Hope, still small but no longer skeletal, wiggled with joy in Sophie's arms. "Thank you," Sophie said to Tommy, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for hearing her when I couldn't." "You always heard her," Tommy. "Ah," replied, "in your heart. That's why she survived." As they watched Sophie and Hope leave, beginning their new life together, Sarah asked her son, "How do you do it? How do you know these things?" Tommy looked up at her, then at Max, who sat faithfully beside him. "I don't know, I just listen. Most people hear with their ears. I hear with something else." "Is it hard, knowing what they've been through?" Tommy considered this. "Sometimes. But it's harder not to help when I can." A month passed. The rescued dogs, now known as the Brackenridge survivors, were slowly being placed in carefully vetted homes. Soldier, despite his trauma, was adopted by a veteran with PTSD who understood about wounds that didn't show. They healed each other, two soldiers finding peace. The Millers settled back into routine, or as much routine as was possible when your son could communicate with animals. Max continued to strengthen, his limp barely noticeable now. Tommy returned to school, where his classmates treated him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Then came the night that would change everything again. Tommy woke not to crying, but to Max's urgent nudging. The German Shepherd was agitated, pacing to the window and back to the bed. "What is it, boy?" Tommy whispered. Max whined, pawing at the window. Tommy looked out into the darkness and saw nothing unusual, but the feeling was there, that pull in his chest that meant something needed help. "It's not close, is it?" Tommy asked. Max's continued agitation was answer enough. "It's big, bigger than before." Tommy crept to his parents' room. They woke immediately, trained now to respond to their son's midnight discoveries. Max says something's wrong, Tommy explained. Not here, somewhere else. But it's bad, Mom. Really bad. Mark reached for his phone. Should I call Sheriff Davies? Tommy shook his head. Not yet. I need to understand first. They followed Tommy and Max downstairs, where the dog stood at the front door, trembling with urgency. When Mark opened it, Max shot out into the yard, then stopped, nose to the wind, testing scents humans couldn't detect. He's trying to find it, Tommy translated. There's so many voices. Voices? Sarah asked. Animal voices? Tommy nodded, his small face creased with concentration. They're scared, trapped, and there's water. Why is there water? Mark pulled out his phone, checking local news. His face went pale. The dam, he said. The Riverside Dam broke an hour ago. Flash flooding in the valley. The valley was 20 miles away. Rural farmland where many people kept animals. Horses, cattle, dogs, cats. If the dam had broken, we have to go, Tommy said urgently. They're drowning, Dad. The animals are drowning. Mark was already grabbing keys. Sarah, call Sheriff Davies. Call everyone. We need boats, ropes, anyone who can help. The drive to the valley was surreal. The normally quiet rural roads were chaos. Emergency vehicles, evacuating families, water where water had never been. The closer they got, the more agitated both Tommy and Max became. Turn here, Tommy said suddenly, pointing to a side road that disappeared into water after 50 feet. Tommy, we can't drive through. Not drive, listen. Mark stopped the car. In the distance, barely audible over the rush of water and emergency sirens, they could hear it, barking, howling, the panicked cries of trapped animals. Sheriff Davies arrived minutes later with a boat. The human evacuation is mostly complete, he said. But the animals, they left them, Tommy said, his voice thick with tears. They saved themselves and left the animals. Not everyone, the sheriff corrected gently. Some people refused to leave without their pets, but others, it happened too fast. Tommy was already climbing into the boat. We have to hurry. What followed was a night none of them would forget. Using Tommy's uncanny ability to locate the animals most in danger, they worked through the darkness. A horse trapped in a barn, water rising to its chest, eyes wild with terror, until Tommy's voice calmed it enough for Mark to lead it to safety. 3 dogs on a roof, abandoned, who wouldn't come to anyone but the strange boy who seemed to speak their language. The most heartbreaking was a mother cat who wouldn't leave her hiding spot. Tommy listened to her cries, then began searching through the flooding debris until he found what she was protecting, a litter of kittens in a rapidly flooding drain pipe. She won't leave them, Tommy explained, tears streaming down his face as he handed the soaked kittens to Sarah one by one. She'd rather drown than leave them. They saved them all, mother and 5 kittens, cold and scared, but alive. By dawn, they'd rescued 17 animals. Other teams, inspired by Tommy's efforts and guided by his seemingly impossible knowledge of where to look, saved dozens more. The emergency shelter set up at the high school became an impromptu animal refuge, families reuniting with pets they'd thought lost forever. But Tommy's work wasn't done. Among the rescued animals, he identified those whose families hadn't made it out, those who were now alone. He sat with each one, a 5-year-old boy offering comfort in a language older than words. One dog in particular caught his attention, an elderly golden retriever, partially blind, who wouldn't stop staring at the door. He's waiting, Tommy told the shelter coordinator. His person is coming. Honey, his house was completely destroyed. If his owner survived, they've probably gone to stay with family. No, he's coming, today. 2 hours later, an elderly man arrived at the shelter, supported by a walker, still in hospital clothes. Please, he said to anyone who would listen. My dog, Duke. He's all I have. I had a heart attack during the evacuation. They wouldn't let me go back for him. Tommy led Duke to the door. The moment the dog caught his owner's scent, he began crying. Actual tears that dogs weren't supposed to be able to produce. The reunion left not a dry eye in the shelter. How did you know? The coordinator asked Tommy. Duke knew. He felt his person's heart calling. They're connected. Tommy paused, looking around at all the animals and humans in the shelter. They're all connected. We just forget sometimes. The flood rescue made national news. Tommy's story, the boy who could hear animals' cries for help, spread across social media. Interview requests poured in, but the Millers declined most of them. Tommy wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in the work. A week after the flood, Dr. Rodriguez approached the Millers with a proposal. "There's a grant available," she said, "for innovative animal therapy programs. I want to apply for it, to create a program centered around Tommy's gift." "He's 5 years old," Sarah protested. "He should be playing, not working." "It wouldn't be work, Doctor," Rodriguez explained. "It would be structured play, learning, helping. Tommy could work with traumatized animals a few hours a week, teaching other children how to connect with them. We'd document everything, try to understand his gift, maybe even teach others." Tommy, who'd been listening from the doorway with Max, stepped forward. "I want to do it. I want to teach other kids how to listen." The program, officially called the Bridge Project, but known locally as Tommy's Place, launched 2 months later in a renovated barn on Dr. Rodriguez's property. The first students were Sophie and 5 other children who'd shown unusual empathy with animals. Tommy, despite being the youngest, was the teacher. He showed them how to be still, how to watch, how to feel what the animals were feeling. Not all of them could do what Tommy did, but all of them learned something. "It's not about talking to them," Tommy explained to his small class, Max demonstrating beside him. "It's about listening with your whole self. Animals don't use words. They use feelings, pictures, knowing." Sophie proved to be the most talented student, perhaps because she'd already learned to read animals through necessity, watching for signs of her father's violence. Hope, now healthy and playful, became her assistant, helping to calm fearful animals. One day, a woman brought in a parrot that hadn't spoken since her husband died 6 months ago. The bird sat hunched and miserable, plucking its own feathers. The woman was in tears. "He was my husband's bird." They talked all day. Now, nothing. Tommy approached the cage slowly, Max beside him. For a long time, he just sat there, watching the bird. Then he began to speak, not to the parrot, but to the air, as if someone else was listening. "He misses you too. He doesn't understand where you went. He thinks he did something wrong. That's why you left." The parrot's head tilted, focusing on Tommy with one bright eye. "He wants to know if you still love him," Tommy continued. "If you can still hear him." The parrot shifted on its perch and then, in a voice rusty from disuse but clear, said, "Love you, Charlie." "Miss you, Charlie," the woman gasped, sobbing. "Charlie was my husband. Oh my God, how did you—" The bird needed to know it was okay to speak again, Tommy explained, that his person would want him to. Word of the miracle with the parrot spread, bringing more challenging cases to the Bridge Project. A horse that wouldn't let anyone ride it after its previous owner's abuse. A dog that had stopped eating after its companion dog died. A cat that had become aggressive after being the only survivor of a house fire. Tommy worked with each one, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. Not all of them could be helped completely, but all of them improved, and more importantly, Tommy was teaching others his methods. "Feel, don't think," he instructed his students. "Your brain gets in the way. Feel with your heart, your belly, that place where you know things without knowing how." One student, a boy named Marcus who'd been labeled as autistic and nonverbal, proved especially gifted. He couldn't speak to humans easily, but with animals, he found his voice. Through Tommy's teaching, Marcus learned to communicate his needs by showing his therapy dog, who would then alert his parents. "See," Tommy said proudly, "everyone can learn, everyone can connect. They just need someone to show them how." The program grew. What started with 6 children became 12, then 20. Dr. Rodriguez documented everything, working with researchers from the state university who were fascinated by what they were observing. "It's not telepathy," one researcher concluded. "It's heightened empathy combined with exceptional observation skills and intuitive processing." Tommy picks up on microsignals that most of us miss, tiny changes in breathing, muscle tension, pupil dilation. His brain processes these signals differently, translating them into understanding. But Tommy had a simpler explanation. "Love," he said when asked about his gift. "I love them, and they know it. Love is a language everyone understands." 6 months into the Bridge Project, Tommy faced his biggest challenge yet. A wolf dog hybrid, confiscated from an illegal owner, was scheduled to be euthanized. Too wild for a home, too domesticated for the wild, it had attacked 3 handlers. "Please," the animal control officer begged Dr. Rodriguez. "If anyone can reach him." They brought the wolf dog, called Ghost for his pale eyes, in a reinforced cage. He was magnificent and terrifying, lips pulled back in a permanent snarl, eyes full of rage and fear. "Don't go near him, Doctor," Rodriguez warned Tommy. "This isn't like the others. He's dangerous." Tommy studied Ghost from a distance. Max pressed against his leg. For the first time since finding Max, Tommy looked uncertain. "He's not angry," Tommy finally said. "He's confused. He doesn't know what he is, wolf or dog, wild or tame. He doesn't fit anywhere. Can you help him?" Tommy was quiet for a long moment. "I need to think about it, to dream about it." That night, Tommy had the most vivid dream of his life. He was running through a forest, not as a boy, but as something else, something between human and animal. Beside him ran Ghost, and they understood each other perfectly in this in-between space. When he woke, Tommy knew what to do. "We can't make him fit," he told Dr. Rodriguez the next morning. "We have to find where he already belongs." They contacted a wolf sanctuary 2 states away, a place where wolf dogs could live in large enclosures, not wild, but not pets either. The challenge was getting Ghost there safely. "I'll ride with him," Tommy volunteered. "Absolutely not," Sarah said immediately, but Tommy was insistent. "He needs to know he's not being abandoned again. He needs someone to explain where he's going." After much debate, a compromise was reached. Tommy could ride in the transport van, separated from Ghost's cage by a barrier, with Max beside him and his father driving. The 8-hour drive was one of the most intense experiences of Tommy's young life. He talked to Ghost the entire time, telling him about the sanctuary, about the other wolf dogs he'd meet, about the acres of forest where he could run. Slowly, Ghost's snarling quieted. By hour 3, he was lying down. By hour 5, he was watching Tommy with curiosity instead of aggression. When they arrived at the sanctuary, Ghost walked out of his cage calmly, following the sound of Tommy's voice. "I've never seen anything like it," the sanctuary director said. "He's usually aggressive with strangers, but with your son?" "Tommy understands the in-between," Mark said proudly. "The spaces where most of us don't fit." As they watched Ghost explore his new home, Tommy said quietly, "He's going to be okay now. He found his place." The drive home was quiet, Tommy exhausted from the emotional effort of the day. But as they pulled into their driveway, they found Sheriff Davies waiting for them. "We have a situation," he said, "a big one." A hoarding case had been discovered in the next county. Over 100 animals in one house. The owner had died, and the animals had been alone for days. The scale was beyond what local services could handle. "We need Tommy," the sheriff said simply. "We need the bridge project. Will you help?" Tommy looked at his parents, at Max, at the sheriff. He was 6 years old now, no longer the small boy who had heard crying under the house. He'd found his purpose, his gift, his place in the world. "Yes," he said, "we'll help. All of us." The hoarding rescue would become the bridge project's biggest success, with Tommy's students working alongside him to evaluate, calm, and categorize over 100 traumatized animals. It took weeks, but every animal was saved, treated, and eventually placed. Sophie worked with the cats, her gentle patience perfect for the skittish felines. Marcus connected with the birds, understanding their need for quiet and space. Other students found their own specialties, their own ways of bridging the gap between human and animal. "You did this," Sarah told Tommy one evening, watching the news coverage of the rescue. "You taught them all how to listen." "Max did it," Tommy corrected, hugging his dog. "He taught me that every life matters, that everyone deserves to be heard." As Tommy's story spread, the boy who started by saving one German shepherd and ended up creating a movement, people began to pay attention to the animals in their own communities. Shelters reported increased adoptions. Reports of animal abuse rose as people became more vigilant. Communities started their own versions of the Bridge Project, but for Tommy, the fame and the accolades didn't matter. What mattered was the work, the daily miracle of connection between species. Every morning, he woke up knowing that somewhere, an animal needed help, and he had the gift to provide it. One evening, as the sun set over the Miller farm, Tommy sat on the porch with Max, Soldier, who'd returned to them after his adoptive owner passed away, and the latest rescue, a three-legged cat named Tripod. His parents watched from the doorway as their son, still so young but somehow ancient in his understanding, communicated silently with his animal family. "Do you think he'll always have this gift?" Sarah asked Mark. "I think he'll always make us see animals differently," Mark replied. "Whether you call it a gift or just love, he's changed how we all listen." Tommy turned to them then, smiling. "Mom, Dad, did you hear that?" "Hear what, honey?" "The world. It's getting quieter. Not because there's less noise, but because more people are learning to really listen." And in that moment, with the evening light golden on their faces and the animals peaceful around them, they all heard it. The quiet understanding that connects all living things. The language beyond words that Tommy had taught them to recognize. It had started with a German shepherd crying from a pit under the house. It had grown into something that touched thousands of lives. And it all came from a 5-year-old boy who knew that sometimes the most important voices are the ones that don't use words at all. 5 years passed. Tommy was 11 now, taller but still slight, his gift stronger than ever. The Bridge Project had become a nationally recognized program with chapters in 12 states. Tommy traveled sometimes, teaching other children, consulting on difficult cases, always with Max by his side, though Max moved slower now, gray creeping into his muzzle. One autumn morning, Tommy woke to find Max struggling to stand. The German shepherd who'd survived the unthinkable, who'd saved countless others through his partnership with Tommy, was finally showing his age. Dr. Rodriguez came immediately. Her examination was gentle but thorough, her face grave when she finished. "His kidneys are failing," she said softly. "It's not unexpected given what he went through before you found him. His body worked so hard to survive, and then to help others." "How long?" Sarah asked, her arm around Tommy. "Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." Tommy hadn't cried when they'd found the fighting dogs. He hadn't cried during the flood rescue or any of the other traumas they'd witnessed. But now, looking at Max, his first save, his best friend, his bridge to understanding, the tears came. "It's not fair," he whispered. "He deserves more time." "He deserves peace, Doctor," Rodriguez said gently. "And to choose his own time." Tommy looked at Max, and that connection sparked between them, as it had thousands of times before. But this time, Tommy heard something different. Not fear, not pain, but readiness. "He says he's tired," Tommy translated, his voice breaking. "He says he did what he came here to do." They brought Max home, making a comfortable space in the living room where he could see everything, be part of everything. Word spread through the community, and people began arriving. Families whose pets Max had helped save, children from the Bridge Project, Sophie with Hope, even Sheriff Davies. Each visitor brought a story, a memory of how Max had changed their life. The old German shepherd listened to each one, his tail giving weak wags of acknowledgement. On the third day, Max stopped eating. Tommy stayed by his side, no longer trying to convince him to fight, just being present. They had entire conversations without words, reviewing their years together, the lives they'd saved, the love they'd shared. "I understand now," Tommy told his parents that evening. "Max didn't just teach me to hear animals. He taught me that love doesn't end. It just changes shape." That night, with Tommy's hand on his head and surrounded by those who loved him, Max closed his eyes for the last time. His breathing slowed, then stopped. So peacefully that for a moment no one realized he was gone. Tommy felt it though. Felt the moment Max's spirit slipped free, felt it brush against him like a whisper. Felt it say goodbye and thank you, and until we meet again. The entire town mourned Max. The local newspaper ran a full front-page tribute to the German shepherd who'd started it all. A memorial service at the Bridge Project drew hundreds of people and their pets, all whose lives had been touched by Max's story. But the most meaningful tribute came from Tommy himself. Standing before the crowd, 11 years old, but speaking with the wisdom of someone who'd learned life's hardest lessons, he said, "Max taught me that every life has value. That pain doesn't have to be forever. That love is stronger than fear." He was trapped in darkness, crying where no one could hear him. But we heard him, we saved him, and then he helped us save so many others. That's what we're supposed to do. Listen for the cries we can barely hear. Look for the ones who are trapped. Be the bridge between fear and hope. Max is gone, but what he taught us isn't. Every time we help an animal, every time we choose kindness over indifference, Max is still here. In the weeks that followed, donations poured into the Bridge Project to establish the Max Memorial Fund, ensuring that no animal would be turned away for lack of money. A statue of Max was erected at the entrance with a plaque that read, "Max, the dog who taught us to listen." Tommy continued his work, though something had changed in him. The loss of Max had deepened his gift, added a dimension of understanding about endings and beginnings. He could sense not just an animal's present pain, but its entire story, past trauma, present need, future potential. 6 months after Max's passing, a call came that would test everything Tommy had learned. A marine park in Florida was closing, and their last remaining dolphin, elderly and blind, needed placement. No facility would take her. Too old, too damaged, too expensive to maintain. "She'll die if we can't find somewhere," the caller pleaded. "Someone said you might be able to help." Tommy had never worked with a dolphin before, but he remembered Max's fearlessness in facing the unknown, and he said yes. The journey to Florida was surreal. Tommy, now accompanied by Soldier, who'd become his constant companion after Max's death, stood at the edge of a massive tank where the dolphin, named Pearl, floated listlessly. "She's given up," the marine biologist explained. "She hasn't performed or played in years. She barely eats. We think she's just waiting to die." Tommy sat by the pool's edge, his hand in the water. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just as the sun began to set, Pearl approached. Her blind eyes couldn't see him, but something else did. The connection, when it came, was unlike anything Tommy had experienced. Pearl's consciousness was vast, ancient, filled with memories of open ocean she'd never known, but somehow remembered in her DNA. She showed Tommy her life, captured as a calf, decades of performance, the slow loss of everything that made life worth living. "I'm sorry," Tommy whispered. "I'm so sorry for what we did to you." Pearl's response wasn't words or images, but something deeper. Forgiveness mixed with exhaustion. Love shadowed by loss. Tommy turned to the assembled team. "She doesn't want to die. She wants to go home, to the ocean." "That's impossible," the marine biologist said. "She's blind, can't hunt, doesn't know how to survive in the wild. Then we teach her. Or we find a middle way." What followed was a massive undertaking. Tommy's story had taught people to believe in impossible things, and when he called for help, help came. A sea pen was constructed in a protected bay, a halfway house between captivity and freedom. Volunteers worked around the clock to prepare it. Tommy spent 3 weeks with Pearl, preparing her for the transition. He couldn't speak dolphin, but he could share feelings, images, of open water, the promise of space to swim. The day of Pearl's release into the sea pen was broadcast nationally. As the elderly dolphin swam into the larger enclosure, feeling real ocean currents for the first time in 40 years, she breached, a perfect arc of joy that left everyone in tears. "She says thank you," Tommy reported, though by now no one doubted his translations. Pearl lived another 2 years in her sea pen, teaching humans about resilience, about the crimes of captivity, about the possibility of freedom even at the end of life. When she died, it was with Tommy beside her, his hand in the water, bridging the gap between species one last time. By the time Tommy turned 13, the Bridge Project had become an international movement. Tommy himself had become something of a legend, the boy who could speak to animals, who'd started with a German shepherd in a pit and ended up changing how the world saw interspecies communication. But fame had never been the point. The point was the work, the daily choice to listen, to care, to bridge the gap between human and animal understanding. One day, a reporter asked Tommy if he ever regretted his gift, if the weight of hearing so much pain ever became too much. Tommy thought about it, his hand resting on Soldier's head. "Max suffered alone in that pit for weeks before I heard him. How many others are suffering right now that no one hears? If I can prevent even one animal from dying alone and afraid, then no, I don't regret it. It's not a burden, it's a purpose. What do you want people to remember from your story?" Tommy smiled, and for a moment, The reporter could swear she saw Max's spirit reflected in the boy's eyes. That everyone can learn to listen, maybe not the way I do, but in their own way. Every person who's ever loved a pet knows that communication doesn't require words. We're all connected. Humans, animals, all of us. We just forget sometimes, Max reminded me. Now I remind others. The interview ended, but Tommy's work continued. Every day brought new challenges, new animals in need, new people learning to listen. And though Max was gone, his legacy lived on in every rescue, every connection, every moment of understanding between species. As Tommy stood in the barn that housed the Bridge Project, surrounded by recovering animals and eager students, he felt Max's presence like a warm breeze. The German Shepherd who'd been crying from a pit under the house had become so much more, a teacher, a healer, a bridge between worlds. "Thank you, Max," Tommy whispered to the air, "for everything." And somewhere, in that space between memory and spirit, a tail wagged in response. The story of Tommy and Max had come full circle. What began with a child hearing cries no one else could hear had become a movement that changed thousands of lives. The boy who'd crawled under a house to save a dying dog had grown into a young man who'd revolutionized animal rescue and rehabilitation. But perhaps the most important lesson was the simplest one, that love transcends species, that kindness creates ripples that never end, and that sometimes the smallest voice, whether it's a child's or an animal's, can change the world if someone just takes the time to listen. As the sun set over the Bridge Project, casting golden light through the barn windows, Tommy gathered his students for their daily meditation. They sat in a circle, humans and animals together, breathing in unison, connected by something deeper than words. "Close your eyes," Tommy instructed. "Feel your heartbeat. Now feel the heartbeat of the animal beside you. Feel how they match, how they're a part of the same rhythm. That's where understanding begins, in the space between heartbeats, in the silence between breaths. That's where we're all the same." The children listened, learned, and slowly began to understand what Tommy had always known, that the bridge between human and animal isn't built with words, but with love, patience, and the willingness to truly listen. And in that barn, surrounded by the saved and the saviors, the legacy of a German shepherd named Max lived on. Proof that one act of compassion can echo through eternity, that one child's gift can awaken the gifts in others, and that no cry for help, no matter how faint or far away, goes unheard when hearts are open and listening. The story would continue, of course. There would always be animals in need, always be children discovering their own gifts, always be bridges to build between species. But the foundation had been laid, solid and true, built on the love between a boy and a dog who'd found each other in the darkness and brought each other into the light. Tommy was 15 now, had saved hundreds of animals, taught thousands of people, changed countless lives. But when asked about his greatest accomplishment, his answer never varied. "I heard Max crying when no one else did." Everything else came from that one moment of listening. And that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all, that changing the world doesn't require grand gestures or special powers. Sometimes it just requires listening when something cries out in the darkness and having the courage to answer, "I hear you. You're not alone. I'm coming to help." If this story touched your heart, if you felt the connection between Tommy and Max, if you believe in the power of compassion to change lives, please like this video and share it with others who need to remember that every life matters. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in humanity and the bonds between all living creatures. And comment below, have you ever experienced a moment of connection with an animal that changed your life? We read every comment and love hearing your stories of hope and healing. Remember, somewhere right now, an animal needs help, and someone like Tommy is listening. Be that person in your community. Listen with your heart. You might just save a life.